watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm David Galman and this is the programme where you can have all of your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is David Galman, Director of Galliard Homes. Welcome to you, David.
Thank you.
I think your first time on Property Question Time.
It is indeed.
We'll try and be gentle, okay. And sitting on your left is John Howard, property developer and TV property expert, all the way in from Ipswich.
Yes, great to see you, and I'm still waiting for you to come to have lunch with me in Ipswich. I've looked in the water.
I promise I'll take you up this year.
Please do.
Very kind of you. What a fantastic invitation.
I didn't say I was paying, no.
Ah, that might cause a problem. Anyway, look, welcome to you both. Thank you for coming in, and we'll get straight on with the questions. And John, you're first. Do the panel think it would be advantageous to have service charge levels capped in multi-unit residential developments? Already some lenders will impose a 1% maximum service charge level as lending criteria. Should this be formalised across the board with legislation?
That's a very topical point, isn't it, really? And whoever wrote that in is, or emailed that in is obviously in one of these properties with high service charge, I would imagine. It's very difficult. As the freeholder, you've got to cover your costs. And at the end of the day, you know, every year things get more expensive. At the moment, inflation's running at 5-6%. And in terms of construction, I think David would agree that, you know, it's running a lot higher than that with building materials especially. So I'm not quite sure how you can control the service charge in that way. The problem with all these things is there's been a few rogues in the past who have taken advantage of a service charge, but with the government recent, you know, legal acts and everything else they've brought out, it's very hard to do. You know, at the end of the day, these residents can vote to manage the block themselves, or they could vote to buy the freehold themselves. So actually, there's enough power there already within the residents, I believe, of these blocks to not have to do any more.
Yeah, I tend to sit on the fence a little bit with this.
Well, you
John,
would, wouldn't you? Because you live in a penthouse.
Well, I don't think that's really the issue. But the problem is here that service charges, as a generality, are run without profit. It's not available to the developer or the freeholder to make a profit out of it. Okay, so that should be a controlling influence. I think where you sometimes get a problem, I'm sure David will have a view on this, is where you get a developer who is perhaps using that building as a flagship development for the rest of his portfolio, for the rest of his activities, and sort of instigates service charge spend that's probably not that necessary for the well-running of the building. I think that's where it can often go wrong.
Well, I would say sometimes it's the opposite. They'll subsidise the service charge to get the flat sold.
Oh, they will in the first couple of years, yes.
And then whop it up, and that's wrong as well.
Yeah,
there also needs to be a sinking fund within the service charge so that any large amounts that have to be paid out over the 5 or 10 years' time, there is some support there already financially to do so. It's very important.
I do appreciate that. But I think the other issue is that you're quite right that people can take the bull by the horns and start to say, right, well, we're going to give notice, we'll run it ourselves. The only difficulty I have with that is we have a lot of absentee landlords in London, and getting a sort of collective decision is very difficult, isn't it, David?
It can be, but I think one thing, one point of interest that no one actually ever mentions. If you own your own house, your freehold house, how much do you spend a year maintaining that property? On the garden, on the house, on this and that stuff.
And everything
so it probably, maybe it doesn't level out, but if you're buying into development that has a pool, that has a gym, that has all of these extra facilities and a concierge.
Yeah. We know someone who has, don't we? We know someone who has, David. We're quite close to us.
I couldn't possibly comment.
John's getting onto my favourite subject now. Yes, go on.
But if you've got that, then you're going to expect to pay for it, and that's one of the problems.
It is quite difficult, and we also live in this society in sort of probably some of the central points in London where people expect a very high level of service. I mean, I've seen people come down to our concierge and say, I've got a light bulb going in my flat. Have you got somebody who can do it?
But with all due respect, there's an awful lot of places around the country that aren't at that level and have blocks which may have an issue, may have a problem. So I think there's a balance to it. But my advice is, if you're in a block and you're not happy with the service charge, look into managing it yourself through another company. If you all get together and vote 50%, is it, or is it more than 50%? Yeah. Then you can actually take over the management yourself. So then you've got no complaints at all. To be honest with you.
Sorry, we've had that happen a number of times, and it works. It works for people.
And we have. I've had a freehold bought off me in Norwich, which is crazy. But that's the law. I didn't do anything wrong with it. So there we go.
Okay, touchy subject, and
touchy.
It's all a fee we never want to pay, isn't it? But anyway, there we are. Okay, David, your first question on the programme. This is a good touchy one. You'll love this. Do the panel think that should the government do more to control the amount of foreign capital invested in London properties, especially by wealthy Russian investors? It seems that in the last couple of years, over £2 billion worth of properties have been purchased, and many are held in offshore companies. Obviously, the attraction of UK property investment for overseas investors is the solidarity and safety of our property laws. But is our hospitality to such investments being abused with the loss of taxation, etc.? Well,
there's a thunderbolt for me. Thank you.
Good luck with that one.
Personally, I'm going to say no, they shouldn't do. And I think they've done enough, if not perhaps too much, with the various levels of extra taxation on overseas investors purchasing. Many of the so-called overseas investors are actually people that are buying the property for their own family's use within this country. And I don't see why they should be penalised. You have another problem, which is a developer like us will buy a site, get planning permission, and to build that tower, be it wherever it is, we will need to get pre-sales to assist our funding, which is fairly standard. And the best way to get those pre-sales is still to sell overseas to investors. It doesn't mean you sell the whole building, it just means that you sell a portion of it.
Well, David, two things there. I mean, I've been in that situation with developers, and you go and you say, can we have the funding? And they say, well, let me see that you've sold 20 or 30% of it off plan or whatever. So you then go out to Singapore, Hong Kong, or wherever you go.
It's been all over, haven't you, David?
Right.
Lovely.
Personally, no, but we said
lovely.
And you go out and you get the sales. You come back and you tell the bank, and they say, well, yeah, but of course these are overseas people, so we can't sue them or anything. So couldn't you get some people here to buy them? So you then go out and try and sell a block or two here. You're having to discount it because you're selling it in bulk to get the 20 or 30%. And then they turn around and say, well, you've discounted these. The price is not very good. It's nothing like your proposal, is it? And you're on a bit of a treadmill with this.
The whole thing is a little bit of a treadmill. And at the end of the day, I personally, being a free marketeer, think that we should just be allowed to do whatever we want to do to build our developments and sell them. And as long as we're the right side of the law, then I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think again the difficulty with criticising overseas investment. I mean, certainly in the last recession we had, it was the overseas investment that kept both the construction industry going, the estate agency 100%. Industry,
and of course, this was very London-centric to start with, David. But now, these foreign buyers are buying all over the UK, mainly in big cities, I accept that.
Manchester, Birmingham, and so on.
And all the rest of it, Bristol, and so on. But I mean, it has spread out, and on the whole, it's probably a good thing. Although, is it stopping first-time buyers from getting on the ladder? That's a criticism. I'm not sure that's quite right.
I'm not sure that's right.
Because you've got Help to Buy, which finishes next year, of course. But I mean, you've got Help to Buy and so on. It's been helped 600,000 people or whatever. So
I think the kind of property that overseas investors are buying are not typically the same properties that first-time buyers at the normal level would be buying.
Well, when you quote Russians purchasing billions of pounds, they're buying in Belgravia and Knightsbridge and areas such as that where.
They're not buying where we are.
Tell me a real first-time buyer that can purchase there. And that's always been the same.
That's a good point,
Well, I mean, I think of one development not far from Harrods there, where a studio starts at, £3 or £4 million.
Something along those lines,
Just mad.
Not even got a bedroom, but there we are. Hardly first-time buyer stuff. No. Anyway, good. Okay, well, thank you for that, both. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show, so join me again with John and David after the break.
watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with David Galman and John Howard. Welcome back, guys. John, your second question. Unlike many European countries, the UK does not require any qualifications to become an estate agent. This surely is quite worrying when one considers the amount of investment required these days to purchase property. All other sectors that offer services relating to individuals' money are highly and quite properly regulated. Given that there is an increasing number of online-only agents contracting self-employed people to act as their representatives, it really would seem to me to be a sensible policy to introduce. What do the panel think?
Well, I'm glad you've brought this, the person has emailed this in, and you've chosen this. Because
especially
of course,
for you, John.
Especially for me, because I used to be an agent back when I was 18, 19, 20, 21.
Weren't we all?
Weren't we all? Exactly. That's how we all, I mean, in the old days, David, that's how we all started. You know, all this new education of property, educating people with property, we never had that because most of us started at the grassroots, if you like.
You probably did the photocopying and made the
we
copy.
did the photocopy,
and so on,
and eventually door knocked, and eventually all the rest of it. So I own some estate agents in Norfolk, as some people know. None of our staff are qualified in any shape or form, but they're qualified in life. They're very experienced, and they're very, very good. They're handpicked by me, and they're very, very good at what they do. We turn over £3 million a year, a very successful company. The difficulty is that. First of all, these online agencies, please, in my view, don't touch them. Once you've paid them, what incentive have they got to sell your property? Absolutely none whatsoever. They just want the money up front. And it's very hard to do it for the sort of money properly, to sell your property for the sort of money they're talking about. Because basically, no agent sells more than 50% of the stock they have on the market. Just doesn't happen. They either gets withdrawn or it goes to another agent. And the ones who are selling, the commission that is paid really helps subsidise the ones that aren't sold. So that's the issue. I understand why people think that it should be more regulated, probably. And I do understand that. But there's some very, very good professional people within the business who are not. And I think that would be unkind, unfair on them, who have shown over the years how good they are. And the National Association of Estate Agents does do some training.
Correct.
And you do get, I think I'm one of the founder members actually, but I can't remember now. I haven't kept up my sub, so I'm probably been banned.
You and me both.
Banned. But I mean, and of course, if you want to go further, there is more training you can do, and you can become a chartered surveyor, a building surveyor, and all sorts of different things. So I understand the question. I don't totally agree with the answer. But I think potentially going forward, perhaps there should be something for young people coming into the business now to get better qualified. I would say that the corporates, that's the big 3 or 4 agencies, and we all probably know who they are, do very good training. They really do train their staff very, very well. So, you know, that's my view.
From the wording of the question, it looks like they're more concerned with the ones that advertise that it's on a fixed fee, and they have a local representative who's a self-employed person who can, I suppose, act as a bit of a maverick if they're not careful.
Unfortunately, that's going to happen. I would go for some kind of very, very light touch regulation. Very light touch. At the end of the day, you can't take the commerciality out of it.
No.
And that's what you find with the professionals, the surveyors, and people like that. They don't have the commercial brain or the commercial body to be able to deal with it.
That's very true. They don't need to, because they're professional, qualified, and they act for you. They act for clients.
Correct.
It's a slightly different way of doing it. They're getting paid to do a job, whereas an agent gets paid nothing unless he sells.
Yeah, David. I mean, Galliard are probably one of the biggest London developers now, I think, residentially. So you must be dealing with agents every day of the week. I mean, how would you rate the standard of service that you get?
I probably need to be a little bit careful in how I answer it. It very much depends. We find, with all due respect, you should never say that, but with all due respect to the big boys, who get instructions because they've sold the development to you, and therefore they naturally get the instruction.
They're the rules.
There's less incentive for them to actually get out there and sell. We like to, where we have to use agents, where we might have a scheme that could be struggling, we need the help from local agents, I will send our team in and just tell them to find the most commercial, the most savvy, hard-working local agent. And I think you can't beat that. I think it's the man in the high street.
You don't need a tip because you're the expert. Can I just give the viewers a quick tip? If you're looking for an agent on all these property portals, look for the one with the most properties. Now that might sound mad, but the one with the most properties is probably the most successful agent in the area. The fact that they've got a lot for sale doesn't mean they can't sell. It just means they're good and they get a lot of instructions. Yes. So always pick the one with the most instructions on the whole.
I think the fundamental problem with agency is that, of course, in the good times, all you need to do is employ order takers, really.
Correct.
In the bad times, when you're spending all day long explaining to people why you haven't sold their property,
or trying to save the sale, trying to save it is just as important.
You know, it's a different skill set altogether.
It's a different skill set, and interesting for us in Norfolk, we actually don't want a market that's too hot because of the experience we've got and how good we are at our business. Actually, we come into our own when things aren't.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Which things aren't quite so easy. And it's a little bit like finding property deals, isn't it, David? You know, if the market is too easy and everything's going up, you know, it's harder. I like a market with a bit of blood on the street, and I'm sure you're the same.
Very much the same. Yeah, we don't want to be.
Too hot at the moment.
If it's too hot, it just makes it too easy for people.
I agree.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And also can lead to catastrophe, can't it, for the end user, overcommitting, jumping in because they think the price is
nothing wrong with a bit of that, is there?
Well,
as opposed to gazundering.
You do like being controversial, don't you? But there we are. Okay, well, thanks for that one. David, your second question. Can the panel please explain why some lenders will not finance apartment purchases where the development has retail or service units on the ground floor of the building?
Well, you're throwing me some proper questions today. Tick boxing. As simple as that. It's tick boxing. So it goes back historically to a flat above a bookmaker's, above a takeaway, above a small shop, above a newsagent, where certain lenders, who perhaps were not big lenders at the time but have grown subsequently, just didn't see that as a good property to lend against, and so they would not lend against them. And unfortunately, that's grown into the effect that even if you build a tower or whatever development you do, the planners will inevitably insist that you have retail and or restaurants on the ground floor, which you go along and you do, and you probably make no money on the commercial aspect of the development, and then you get a problem down the line with certain lenders not being prepared to lend. You can get past it, and it's a battle, but it's just another one of those bureaucratic steps that you have to deal with. I wish I could answer why, because I don't see any reason why, but it's there.
I think a couple of reasons. What I think, and I agree with you, David, and I've got a development with 3 empty commercial on the ground floor at the moment, so it's rather sensitive to me at the moment. But two things I'd say. One, sometimes it's because of flooding, to be fair.
Yep.
Where you can't put residential on the ground floor because you're in a flood zone or something like that. So that can be that's a reasonable reason, to be fair. And the second one is they're constantly wanting employment. So employment use is something they're very sensitive about. And of course, let's be quite blunt about it. They get a lot more money out of commercial rates than they do residential rates. That as well.
But John, I've had this before, not a million miles from here, where the local authority will insist on, I'm sorry, David, you probably know the numbers better than I. Is it D1 where it's of social purpose? Yeah. So they insist on you putting some D1 at the base of the development, which is perhaps a nursery or a medical centre or something like that. You can't let it for love nor money because those kind of institutions don't have the money to pay normal commercial rent. So you end up giving it away. It then, to some degree, becomes a burden on the service charge, various things. You know, the upkeep of the outside of that needs to be just the same as the rest of the building. So it really does become a problem, and I put the blame actually at the door of the local authorities insisting on all these things.
I would as well. They've got a lot to answer for. What do you think, David?
I think Stephen knows my view on the planning and the planning system is that it's broken, and unfortunately, it's not that many years ago where a planning application was an A4 envelope.
Yep.
With a set of plans and a check to the local authority, and it got read. Now it's trees. You've got to use trees to create a planning application, and there's so many obstacles put in your way. And as you say, you've got to put these community uses in, which is fine, but who's actually paying for that?
Who's going to run them?
Well, the developers end up paying for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if the local authority were to say, right, okay, you've got to put some D1 in. It needs to be a service for the community. That's fine. I'm all for that. But I think then they've got to respond by saying, but of course it'll be rate free. It'll be they've got to put their £2 in. I think.
It's sort of about sustainability as well, isn't it? Like long term.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah. Okay. And I think overall, there's the cost of development does get inflated by 106 agreements or the modern day equivalent of those, and we end up paying a lot more than people should pay. And of course, when people say doesn't matter, the developer's got plenty of money, they can pay for it. It's not the developer that pays for it, because all the developer does is divide in the number of flats into the amount of money they're spending.
Well, if they can, but you say that. I know you've said that in the past, but I know about David feels about it. It's not as easy just to whack the prices up.
No,
is
of
it?
course
You've got
not,
valuers
because then you sell it and it might get downvalued and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
So you've got that issue to play with.
We won't get on to valuers. I think I've spent most of my life arguing with valuers, probably like you have, David.
Very much so.
Okay. Well, look, there we are. That's all we've got time for today. So a really big thank you to David Galman. David, I hope you've enjoyed your first foray into property question time. John Howard, as ever, thank you very much for your contributions. Welcome as ever. I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.